Hello, beautiful people, and thank you for logging on to the GrenCHAP website. Today, we are talking about familial relationship, understanding healthy versus unhealthy family relationships. I am your host, Lornadale Charles. If you're tuning into the page for the first time, now GrenCHAP is an organization that is an advocate for the LGBTQI community, people living with HIV and AIDS, and sex workers' rights. They are the primary organization working with the LGBT communities in the Tri-Island state of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. Their membership and board and staff may comprise of people from marginalized communities in which they serve. Now, GrenCHAP does not only work with or benefit from persons working with marginalized communities, but through their strategic allegiances, support of studies and publications aimed at increasing knowledge on topics associated with HIV and AIDS, gender and sexual orientation. They have voiced concerns about the treatment of the LGBTQI communities and the people living with HIV and AIDS, and also the sex worker communities. Now, today I have a panelist with me that's going to be talking to you about a topic which I mentioned: familial relationships, understanding healthy and unhealthy family relationships. My panelists for today are Mr. Arthur Pierre and Mrs. Brenda-Lee Johnson-James. I will let the panelists introduce themselves before getting started into our discussion today. I will start with ladies first. So, Mrs. James.
Thank you, Lornadale, for having me and for having us. And thank you, GrenCHAP, for doing such good work and to take care of our people. I am Nicole Brenda-Lee Johnson-James. By profession, I am a licensed clinical and community psychologist. So I am into private practice, but I also work as a guidance counselor at one of our high schools.
Mr. Pierre?
Okay, my name is Arthur Pierre. Let me say that I have, it's still on the books. I am the HIV/AIDS response coordinator at the Ministry of Education, but currently I sit at the National Disaster Emergency, NADMA. I sit at NADMA. So I am in now since 2020 into disaster management. One of the things that I would have done since then was to assist in the response of COVID, to the COVID outbreak and all of that. So I have been here since then. So I'm actually transitioning into disaster management.
Lovely. While we are at you, Mr. Pierre, we will start with you with the first question, right? So can you tell us what is an unhealthy relationship in the context of family relations?
Right. But first and foremost, for us to find out exactly what an unhealthy relationship is, I want to start with what a healthy relationship is. It is one where, let's look at a family, and I like to be very, very practical. You look at a family, and you know that the issues of communication, the issues of trust, the issues of feeling comfortable, of having a safe space in which to operate, the issues of just being yourself, being able to express your feelings. That basically is what a healthy relationship is. Now, if you go on the flip side of that, you know that there is no trust in an unhealthy relationship. You know that there might be fear in an unhealthy relationship. You know that persons cannot express themselves freely. Persons may feel intimidated. They may seem to be conflict all the time without issues of resolution. And persons really and truly cannot grow and be themselves. That is basically what an unhealthy relationship will do.
Mrs. Johnson-James?
It's pretty much the same thing, except to add in terms of, let's say, a clinical or a formal definition. The American Psychological Association has defined an unhealthy relationship or toxic or dysfunctional. We would hear these words to describe it as a family in which the relationship or the communication is impaired. So something has gone awry, okay? And the members are unable to attain closeness and self-expression. So here we're looking for patterns of behaviors. And the patterns of behaviors would be some of the things that Arthur just highlighted, right? So the lack of self-expression would be the the bullying, the control, the lack of closeness would be the fear, the aggression, things like that would contribute to members not being, like a close-knit family. But I suspect as we go on, we would, chat some more about, yeah.
Absolutely. So what you're saying is that some of the things that you're expressing is like unhealthy dynamics when you can't express yourself, you can't articulate exactly what you want to, right? So how then, so that might be, I suppose, like the emotional aspect. You can't express who you are. So what would be some of the physical aspects in terms of, I guess, how would you describe that in the dynamics of a relationship, the physical aspects or the sexual aspects, or even the abuse? Because at some point it becomes abuse when you can't do these things, you can't express who you are, you can't articulate what you really want to do. It's some of, I suppose, mind control. So it might be some form of abuse. How can we explain that to our audience in terms of how we would, I guess, see it? Yeah, Mr. Pierre?
Again, when we look at some of the physical things that come out of an unhealthy relationship, one of the things you may find is violence. Sometimes when people cannot express themselves, they become so frustrated that they almost become violent. Sometimes they may start on things within the house. They may be mashing things up, feeling so frustrated, feeling like if they are being suppressed. Then you may find children, and we are talking in the context of family. One might be overpowering the other. All right. You have the issue of power and control. You may have the issue of the male within the family feeling that he is the dominant figure and he could do and say and behave however he wants. And even in the sexual relationship within that same context, he may feel that he is the dominant one, and there should not be any resistance if the lady says that, look, I don't want to have sex. He may figure that I am the man of the house, and you're supposed to, whatever I need, I'm supposed to be able to get it or to have it. All right, so there's a feeling also of entitlement. This is my behavior, and you'd have heard persons say, "This is who I am," and there's no way of wanting to change. Okay, those are just some of the examples as it relates to some of the physical things. You'll find persons actually becoming bullies, or and on the flip side to that, sometimes persons because of the fear and the intimidation. You find that persons are almost introverted. They don't necessarily want to talk. They become subservient. You have sort of passive-aggressive behaviors going on. And those are some of the things that you may find happening physically within the context of a bad relationship or an unhealthy relationship.
Mrs. James?
Well, I think Arthur articulated quite nicely the physical aspect of dysfunction in family, except maybe to add, some people may be punished in terms of housing. So you might, as we would say, throw somebody out of the house because, and for different, when we talk about the family, the dysfunction and the family dynamics, it would be for a host of reasons, right? In your introduction, you spoke about GrenCHAP being an advocate for the LGBT community. Culturally, And by law, we know how our people feel about this population. So imagine now, we're talking about dysfunctional families. Imagine now somebody discloses or identifies as a gay or a lesbian, and the family members do not approve. They put them out, right? That's a form of physical, right? And you put the person out. Where does he go? Where does she go? Especially depending on the age and if they're unable to finance themselves and things like that. Of course, we look at the physical more as being beaten, but we could never underestimate the impact of the emotional side of the abuse. I know you asked about physical. I just wanted to put that in here, right? So we culturally we have this saying, what is wind?
Sticks and stones may break my bones.
Sticks, right? And all of that. So we sort
Words
of like
hardly hurt them.
Right. So we sort of like normalize certain behaviors at people.
I want to go back to something Mr. Pierre would have spoken about or alluded to, the power and control. Now, from, I guess, a male perspective, how does that characteristic affect our families? And then to you, Mrs. Johnson, you spoke about the LGBT group and somebody being thrown out. How, and I'm not, I guess, give me a little bit more in terms of how the family or families themselves would be effective because somebody is coming out and say they are a different particular orientation, sexual orientation in this case. So Mr. James first, and then I'll come to you.
So, depending on the family that person is coming from, so that person may be a member of a religious family, right? And the standards, the values of the church, their religion, they do not believe in that. So the family sees that now, could see this now as bringing shame and disgrace to the family and to show their lack of appreciation and that they don't want part to do with this, they do not condone it. In some cases, they may make decisions as putting the person out to make a public show that I am not part of this. This in turn, of course, well, we could go on to talk about the emotional, the psychological impact it would have on the individual who is experiencing this kind of behavior or treatment, right? And then, of course, this would bring conflict, like a tug and a pull in the family, because some people may see it as, but this is my brother, this is my sister, and they remain that way in spite of their sexual orientation. So are you is your love for him or her conditional on the conditions that he lives by all of the things that you subscribe to, or just by mere fact that he's a human being, he's your child, he's your brother, he's a member of the family. And so with the different opinions, you could see the pull and the tug, and then maybe other family, extended family members having an opinion, having a say, and it just continues to spiral out of control.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that explanation. Mr. Pierre?
Right. For just to remind me of the question again, the issue of power control within the family.
Power and control, yeah, from a male perspective. Yes.
No, it has a lot to do. Well, this have a lot of connotations attached to it. You have the cultural context in which we grew up within the Caribbean space.
Caribbean, exactly.
Right. You also have the religious context and how we sometimes place things and how we sometimes interpret things as it relates to leadership. All right? So you may have within the family space the male. All right? He from since birth he has been told that the man is the head of the home. Even during his masculine years or or as a boy, he knew that the male in his household was the boss, was the king of the castle. He had to be fed first. The biggest piece of meat was his own. Now I'm putting it in the Caribbean context. You understand? Right. Now he knew that. He knew that. Now, as soon as he is now elevated to that position, he begins to flex his muscle. He has to let whoever into his space, let them know that I'm in charge. So if he has a partner, all right, he's in charge. Whatever I say goes. However I want to see things, that's how it's supposed to be, because I am in charge. I am the head. And of course, that creates a lot of problems for children, for his partner. All right. Some of our male folks go as far as being very possessive. You may have the issues of isolation. I don't want you to associate with X, Y, or Z. I don't want you to go here or there. I need to see what is on your phone. I have to tell you, when you should go and do whatever. So that is the issue of power and control. When it comes to even a sexual relationship, if I want this when I want it, how I want it, and it is all about the person. It's all about the male. So that is how sometimes power and control can really affect families, and you have the other persons really feeling downtrodden, belittled, intimidated. You have issues of self-esteem and all of those things emanating from that sort of power and control attitude by a lot of our males. And let me tell you, they have learned this. This is not something that they just fell on them. As men, we have learned this. This has been taught to us from existing in families that exercise, that the male figure is exercising that degree of power and control. Just to add, even the issue where you may have a woman who is pregnant and the man just basically walks out of the relationship, that too is power and control. Look, I can go when I please, and I can come back when I please. Okay, and it affects children, it affects their partners and so.
You said a lot here that really needs to we need to go through,
unpack.
But I know, but with the scope of the show, something you mentioned about the male has been conditioned or socially constructed to believe that they are in control. And we see it happening, I guess, not just in families, but throughout society on a whole, and in organizations as well. But we will stick to the family for now. So another issue,
sometimes, men perpetrate the behavior most of the time, right? But sometimes I feel like men get a raw deal too. So I agree with everything that
It's so very true.
Yes, but the modeling of the behavior. So men do not just wake up in the morning or one day and just decide, I'm going to exert my power and I'm going to control the situation.
Right.
Sometimes this is, they're victims of it themselves growing up. In the home, the behavior was modeled for them, right? We hear, several of us have heard people saying, if you don't beat me, you don't love me, right?
Right.
We say so many things that have become normalized and ingrained in our people, right? So some of these men grew up in these homes, dysfunctional homes. Nobody is sitting and talking and asking, how do you feel about this? This has not yet been resolved. Let's talk about it. There is no such thing. The events are internalized. They come out in the form of anger. They come out in the form of rage. They come out in the form of, that's all I know. That's how to behave, right? And so they do that. In some instances, again, there may be other things like sexual dysfunctions. We're talking about dysfunctional family patterns and behaviors, right? And with all of these frustrations, not knowing, not having the tools, not having the skills, not having probably even a safe space and place to talk about these things could contribute to some of these behaviors. Now, I'm not condoning it. I am not even condoning a tap on the wrist, right? But I'm just saying sometimes we talk about the men, and my heart goes out, because just as how the survivors who have to experience these things have to get our love, our care, and our support, I believe they too have to suffer the consequence, but we need to love them too, because then it will just continue.
The cycle continues. Absolutely.
I just want to add something to what Brenda-Lee just said. There are some men, and I'll very, very short. There are some men who are sometimes pressured into exercising that issue of power and control, right? By their peers. Why are you making she behave like that so far?
Yeah.
Right? Use the man, right? Mm. And even though he may have a total different definition in his head as to how he should treat his woman or how he should treat his family, he's almost pressured into this sort of cultural definition for manhood.
Absolutely, you are right about that, Mr. Pierre. Another thing that could lead to, I suppose, family dysfunction is that of the abuse of drugs and alcohol. With the same examples that are being used, that can drive men to resort to drugs and alcohol. So, like I said, there's so much here to unpack, but I suppose we have to move on. What happens then for, let's say, for children? I mean, Mrs. James touched on it a little bit. What happens when children grow up in this, I guess, abusive or unhealthy family or relationships? What do you think? What the long-term effect or impact on that for not just the family but for society, I suppose?
So again, we're going back to the modeling, right? A child's first playground, first university, first school, everything is the home and what you see modeled home. So then it's okay to hit a woman if you feel like you do not agree, or it's okay to hit a man, because the dysfunction goes both ways at times. We hear more of it when it's perpetrated by the men, but right. It happens the other way, right? So now, when you ask the question, I sat and I was just thinking about this child. Imagine a child from since, infant phase or so, witnessing this level of violence, because that's what it is. Right. You could imagine the trauma, the fear that is in this child, right? So then there is fear, which could eventually turn out to be perpetrating the same behavior. Emotionally, it could turn out to mean that child becomes so withdrawn, so fearful of adults. The way of coping have been to just hide, just run. Mm-hmm. Now, imagine that person getting into a relationship just even on the playground with their friends, not knowing how to resolve conflicts, not knowing how to, live to fight another day. They may just become bullies themselves because that's what they see. There are so many different ways this could impact the child, right? It impacts them from childhood. It goes into the primary school age. If there is no intervention, that same behavior is growing into a man or a woman in a relationship. And then we see the repeat and the cycle of the dysfunction in our families.
Mr. Pierre?
No, well, Brenda-Lee is certainly correct. And sometimes you have that little baby born and you watch a little innocence. But because the environment is, for want of a better word, toxic, you can't expect that child to grow up exhibiting the same behavior. There are some offsprings of such dysfunctional families that have the intention, I would never become like my father, I would never become like my mother. But when push comes to shove, when they are placed in a very challenging position or situation, you would realize that they really and truly rely on what they were taught and what they saw modeled. And sometimes, it creates a lot of problems going forward for them and for the relationships that they try to forge as they get older. One other thing too is the issue of just communication. Just communicating. Men, when you sometimes you sit down and you listen to men talk, they don't talk about themselves and about the things that they feel. And that has a lot to do with the fact that it has not been done within the space of the family. Okay? To really get your children to talk, you need to have conversations with them. You need to model how you speak to them. In the Caribbean context, the only time you would hear talking is when somebody quarreling, when somebody blaming somebody, when somebody telling them they head big and they this and they, all of that. Okay, but when it comes to actually expressing how they feel, that is not even listened to, and you may even have that in some of the schools. Right? If teachers are not trained to really and truly listen to children, listen to their side of the story. Everybody have a side. Everybody have something that they need to say, and we really need to encourage that level of communication. Again, communication is one of those ingredients that is so needed to ensure that families are really, really healthy groups within, or have healthy space within our society and community.
Absolutely. I was going to mention communication. I suppose, do you think that would be is a cultural thing, particularly? And I'm asking that in the context of I mean, growing up in Grenada, when adults are talking, or if you have a question, you ask why. I tell you, don't ask me. I tell you, I'm the mother. You're the child. I'm the parent. You're the child. So don't question it. But ironically, when they reach in the schools, and that's where your communication skills begin, by questioning things and getting responses. So they might ask you why 1,000 times. There are reasons why they're asking you those whys, because it's not making sense in their minds. And so yes, when you get to a particular stage, you're not accustomed questioning anything. So you resort to what you know, the learned behaviors that you guys I guess spoke about, touch on in different aspects.
Let me give you just a personal story.
Okay.
My son, when he was small, he used to babble, and you could really up to around age 5, you really couldn't understand what he was saying, but he just babbling and one of the time I remember a teacher was saying to us, I don't understand what he's saying anymore, but I'll leave him and let him talk. Now today, right? Today, even when, for example, he got punishment and all that at home, I say I wouldn't tell him to shut up. Right? And it is, telling somebody shut up in my home is almost like a bad word.
Right.
Because I believe everybody have an opportunity and should get the opportunity to speak. One of the benefits I'm seeing now is that in almost everything that he does, he comes and he talks about it. Now, I think that is, for me, that is heavenly for a parent, because you get to understand exactly what are some of the challenges that he's going through. He's able to express his feelings about things. He's now 15 years, and, he has now he almost immediately seen the attention to girls and all of that comes, much to the dislike of his mother, but nonetheless. He is able to come and say exactly how he feels, and that is what you want to have within a family, where your children could just come and say exactly how they feel without having judgment, without having to feel embarrassed or bad or anything like that. But it starts at a very, very early age, where you have to almost encourage that sort of expression from your children.
Absolutely. But the thing is, I suppose it's much deeper. I guess we have a number of layers to unpack, but within the
Of
context,
course,
it has to
of
do
course.
with, our culture. It has to do with our religious perspectives, as you mentioned or alluded to earlier, Mr. Pierre. So there is so much that we have to take into consideration when we decide to start our families,
Mm,
right? When you decide to have kids, there are certain discussions that needs to be had. How are you going to raise that child? I mean, what's the religious perspective that you're going to take on that child? If he or she, and in recent times, children are saying they're attracted to, at a very young age, they're attracted to a particular gender. If he or she says they are attracted to a particular gender, how are you as a parent going to deal with that? So we need to be, I guess, mindful moving forward in this modern times, that the structure and nature of family has changed over time. It's not the, I suppose, the extended family that we knew, or the nuclear family, or in some cases we say the single parent families. So my next question is, and Mr. Pierre, you explained what was a healthy relationship at the very beginning. How then can we start to teach, to educate, to inform, not just parents but children, of what a healthy relationship is? Not necessarily an intimate relationship, because
yeah,
as
yeah.
Mrs. James mentioned, sometimes when they go out on the playground, they don't know how to interact with each other, because again, the lack of communication, and they resort to the tools or the skills that they would have learned. How then do we give children, family, persons on a whole, because at some point some might consider having families, and as I mentioned, there are different types of families right now. How do we give the necessary skills so that people could deal with the challenges that life has, and also that of having healthy relationships? And I'm not just talking about intimate relationships in terms of a mother, father, children, but just how you interact with your peers, your brothers, your sisters, your cousins, because all of that is part of the extended family, and by extension, the communities in which you would be engaging with. Yeah.
So
Anyone could go
right.
first.
I hand over to Miss Johnson James.
So the question on the floor is how do we begin, like, providing parents or, well, society with
Society,
the
the
tools and
relevant
so.
tools to see with, to sort of get rid of the dysfunction, the dysfunction in within the
Right.
families, all the things that we speak about. So we kind of
But
pulling
yeah,
everything together.
together. So how I see it is that for us to move from dysfunction to functional, dysfunctional to functional, there must be some level of acknowledgement, right?
Right.
Because for some people, nothing is wrong with the way they conduct business.
Right.
That is us. So we
So we
did.
did.
So we did.
So we did.
So there must be some level of acknowledgement that there is dysfunction. We're not communicating effectively with each other. Now, if they don't have the tools, of course, they would have to get the help.
Right.
So first there is the acknowledgement. Next, there is somebody coming to terms with saying, I want to change. I want to break that cycle. I am tired of the way we conduct business. Look at how the family has broken down. So many instances of confusion and TB, as we would see, right? And
Local
then,
talents. Yeah.
yeah, right? And then we have to communicate honestly with each other. We have to be able to hold each other accountable for your contribution. And in any relationship, you contribute healthily or you contaminate it, right? So we have to be able to acknowledge the role that we're playing in it. And of course, establish healthy and appropriate boundaries. Some of the
Right.
reasons why some families are dysfunctional, there is no boundary. Do as you want is carnival, right? So we have to establish healthy and appropriate boundaries. These are some of the words that you would not use in conversation to me as a parent or as an adult sibling, right? If you need something, Arthur started talking about it, you spoke about it, the open communication. Now, how easy is this? That's the big question, right? Because after operating in a certain space and a certain way for a period of time, getting that positive behavior change would be difficult. But difficult is okay. Difficult is doable. So there must be the will and, of course, to reach out to professionals for the help. Because I believe if they could have done it by themselves, they would not have been in the position in the first place. So reach out. Again, we spoke about religion. We cannot move away from the fact that religion plays a pivotal role in our culture. We have so many different religions, right? And so turn to your faith. Go to the pastor, go to the priest, go to somebody who you believe may possibly help in a positive way.
Right. Mr. Pierre?
Well, I think Brenda-Lee touched on some very, very important points. But acknowledgement, I want to just expand on that a little bit. While you may acknowledge that there is a problem, again, Brenda-Lee said earlier that sometimes people figure, look, this is it. This is the best that I have. They to really understand that it just might not be the ideal thing. Persons really have to do the introspection. And of course, just as Brenda-Lee said, you may have to turn to some professionals to be able to assist you in doing the intervention if you want to look at the entire family, or doing the introspection if you want to look at yourself as an individual. All right? You have to understand that whatever you do and say, you cannot change the next individual. You cannot change, but you have to maybe bring them to a point where they can see that there might be a better way for that family to function, or for that family to operate. Sometimes people live in that dysfunctionality for so long that they have become comfortable. They know how to cope. They have grown some tough skin. So they know how to just, go through the challenge. But you have to introduce to them a different way. Now, again, it is easier said than done. Much easier said than done. Sometimes it may take a period of time. Okay? And during that discourse, persons have to be patient, persons have to be understanding, persons have to be tolerant. You can't expect change overnight. You'll not be able to expect change overnight. But the thing is that as long as you have the intention and you have that objective and that goal, this is where I want to see my family, okay? And you go all out to ensure that you do the right things, you say the right things, and you create the atmosphere where persons can be able to express freely. You can't tell them how to express themselves, but if they can express themselves freely and not become agitated or irritated or aggressive towards the way that they express, you might be able to win them over by peace, in peaceful means and by love.
Absolutely. But as you say, it's a process, and we also need to understand our society, particularly coming out of slavery. Those are learned behavior that our parents would have learned and inherited and would have passed it on. And we know that when somebody spank you, somebody tell you something hurtful, that it makes you feel some form of way that is not happiness. So if it's making you feel that particular way, I would argue here, if you're not satisfied when somebody says something about you, don't do it to the other person. I suppose that's one way to start. The golden rule: do unto others. If we're going to take that approach, another thing is we have to make, as both of you said, we have to unlearn some of the things that we would have learned. And when we start unlearning, because we have to know, as you say, yes, it's easier said than done. But if we know, we have to change our mindset. Because if we want our children to grow up in loving homes and we want the communities, because by extension, we are the communities, because we are the same one that going out there,
That's right.
outside the
That's right.
home and perpetuate the behaviors that is unacceptable. Because then when I leave my community, I move to another one and I'm starting a family, I'm taking whatever I learned from community A to community B, and the cycle continues, right? So we have to make, I suppose, that conscious effort to unlearn, understand what our society had to do to deal with in the past, understand where we at and as families, as individuals, as communities, where we want to go, and unlearn and make that conscious and deliberate effort. It has to be conscious and deliberate effort, as you guys would have said. Another point that you made, Mr. Pierre, is that of one of the things I want to add is that of when you expressing who you are, what you want to say, let's do so respectfully as well, not with the aggression and the profanities, because then that in and of itself is creating other issues. So I suppose my final question to both of you, just to wrap up, what are the benefits of having healthy familial relationships? What are the benefits of having healthy familial relationships, not just for the homes, but for society by extension? My final question.
If you have healthy relationships within the scope of family, remember, family is that single unit that makes up society, makes up community. You can expect a better community. You can expect a community where persons are a little bit more empathetic towards each other. We are a little bit more tolerant of each other, a little bit more understanding of each other. Where conflict resolution or conflict can be resolved without issues of violence or without bad feelings and so. You can expect a society where persons feel free to express themselves and feel free to be able to show exactly who they are, respecting other persons, understanding boundaries and so. You can expect that children would grow up to be able to be citizens that you one would respect, that you'll be proud of, that it will paint a good picture if persons when they're coming out from a family that is unhealthy, where you come out from a family that is healthy, that they know their boundaries, they know exactly how to treat each other within the family, and certainly treating the other person the same way that they would like to be treated. Those are just some of the benefits of having a family that is healthy. Persons, there wouldn't be that issue of distrust. There would not be that issue of hostility, and all those negative things that I spoke about earlier when we looked at the unhealthy family. Persons will feel a sense of pride in themselves. The issue of self-esteem and all of that. Persons will think highly of themselves and certainly think highly of others.
Mrs. James?
So I would add, there would be a feeling of safety and protection in the house, right? And we cannot underestimate the power of safety. Almost anything we do, we get the confidence from feeling safe, right? So in the home where there is little to no violence, and we want to, on the side of no violence, the children would feel safe. If you feel safe, Arthur spoke about the self-esteem, your self-confidence, you're going out into society, you're going out into the school, you're going out into the workplaces, and wherever you go, there you are, so you bring these things with you. Another powerful benefit of a healthy family would be problem solving. So we're not pushing the issues under the rug. We're using our skills, we're using our healthy communication skills to talk things out and to share and to listen to each other. There would be warmth and there would be concern for each other in a healthy family. Of course, stress management. We'd be able to manage our stress because we have the support of members of the family, or we may not be so stressed because there isn't this level of stress in the family. And open communication. I think we be labeled the lack of communication, but there would be open communication. People would be able to talk about how they feel and what their needs are. And I want to put in that word again, empathy. If I'm not going through it, I don't feel as though it's important. But once this is happening within the confines of a healthy family relationship, there will be empathy and interest in each other's needs and interest in each other's concerns.
Absolutely. I love how you guys both wrapped it up holistically. And by extension, we have a safe and healthy society on a whole. So thank you guys so much for taking the time from you. We know that you both are very busy, scheduled to come on the platform and speak to familiar relationship, understanding healthy versus unhealthy relationships through the GrenCHAP community educational and capacity building awareness. So thank you again, and you guys are appreciated. Go out there and do the great job that you're doing. I know you both are doing excellent jobs in the fields that you are. So thank you so much, guys, for your time.